Could I request that we get settled? And as we get settled, we are preparing for the poster session. So the following colleagues, let me just request you to come forward. Do we have Perpetual Ikebudu? Perpetual from Nigeria? Perpetual? Oh, good. Please, yeah. Please come forward. And we have Mr. Jahangir Alam from Bangladesh. Jahangir? Okay. Do we have Raya Hussein from Maldives? Please come forward. Ebunolua. Okay, okay. Thank you. Do we have a beer band from Tunisia? Are you the one? You're from Tunisia? Are you from Tunisia? No, Bangladesh. Bangladesh, okay, okay, thanks, yeah. A beer band from Tunisia? Do we have Levant? Alpa from Turkey. I'm told it's called Turkey, not Turkey. Yeah, good. Yeah, so each of you is going to have between 4, maximum 5 minutes to sort of like take us through your posters. So I would just request the logistics team, if you can load up the posters, please. So Nigeria. So I'm told Nigeria, it is Madam Ajagun Ebunolua. Is that right? I got it right. From the Nigeria Department of Forestry, Federal Ministry of Environment, Republic of Nigeria. So over to you.
I'll put this on. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ebulu Ajagun from the Federal Department of Forestry under the Ministry of Environment. So the NCA journey for Nigeria began in December 2022, and it's completing this year. And the overall objective of the project is to develop the natural capital accounts to inform policies, plans, and programs for low carbon and climate resilience development in Nigeria. The policy objectives and corresponding key activities were to develop the land accounts at the national scale and develop the ecosystem accounts at the subnational scale level in this case, in 2 pilot states, Kaduna and Nasarawa states, which are the pilot states for the AgriSal project in Nigeria. And then develop the GHG accounts. And then finally, to apply the NCA to inform national and sectorial plans. From so far, the result so far is that the GHG account for 2017 has been developed. The land account at the national scale level also has been developed too. And the ecosystem accounts too are also been developed. The IEEM results and policy options are still under review. Then the tree cover loss analysis was finalized, where it's supposed to be a finding, it's an activity under the application of the NCA into the into policies. And findings from the analysis was that agriculture was the lead driver for deforestation in Nigeria, while wood fuels like firewood, charcoal are the lead drivers for forest degradation. The highlights from the project, well, 50 people were trained during the project, out of which 40% were women. And it involves several stakeholders in the country from different ministries, the private sector, and MDAs. And then finally, the need to have a unified approach to produce the land use land cover maps for Nigeria, because we have so many agencies that are involved in mapping, and also there was was identified that there was a need for a specific standard operating procedures whereby maps, land use land cover maps for the nation is developed, so that there will be a uniqueness across the different agencies. Then finally, the NTA is expected to guide policymakers in achieving the Nigeria's NDC. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the round of applause, and thank you also for keeping time. You were almost spot on 4 minutes. Great. So from Nigeria over to Bangladesh, Mr. Jahangir Alam from the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. Over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, distinguished guests and respected participants. Good morning. I am Mohammad Jahangir Alam, working as a Deputy Director at Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. For your kind information, Bangladesh is one of the world's most disaster and climate vulnerable countries, and at the same time most resilient countries also. To protect our environment, we have constitutional obligation. In the Constitution, Article 18A stated that the state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and to preserve and safeguard the natural resources, biodiversity, wetlands, forests, and wildlife for the present and the future citizens. Some national plans like the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, 8th 5-year plan, Perspective Plan 2041, Delta Plan, Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, National Adaptation Plan, Bangladesh Environmental Statistics Framework 2016 to 2030, environment has given special consideration in every national plan of Bangladesh. In 8th 5-year plan, government is committed to generate resource accounting, natural resource accounting, for example, physical statistics, natural resource accounts and their changes over time by Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. We are working on it, and it is still in the initial stage. We have a long way to go. GPS is supporting Bangladesh with knowledge activities that will inform new policies and investments to address some of the country's environmental priorities and take critical steps toward green and resilient growth. The ongoing GPS activities can largely be divided into 4 thematic pillars. In the first pillar, analyses are being carried out on natural capital-based coastal resilience. The World Bank is working with the Bangladesh Forest Department and the local government engineering department on these analyses, which will inform a new World Bank financed coastal resilience program and support a multidisciplinary approach to coastal resilience. with a strong focus on nature, gender, youth, local communities, jobs, sustainable poverty eradication. The work also supports regional collaboration with India on transboundary issues, particularly in biodiversity conservation in the Sundarbans mangrove forest. In the second pillar, the World Bank is providing support to the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics to support the regular production of priority environmental statistics, including natural capital accounts. The government of Bangladesh is very committed to improving its environmental statistics. There is a there is a Bangladesh environmental statistical framework until 2030 and an environment, climate change, disaster statistics cell within BBS. The World Bank supported a workshop on environmental statistics for green growth which gathered officials from more than 20 different government ministries and departments. The World Bank has also facilitated a study tour to South Korea, which lead to an MOU between Statistics Korea and BBS for modernizing statistical system. Recently, the World Bank is working with the BBS on updating the National Strategy for the Development of Statistics, NSDS, which will inform a new World Bank financed statistics modernization project. The project will have dedicated environmental and gender statistics subcomponents. In the third pillar, the World Bank has provided analytical support to enable green fiscal transfer. The World Bank worked with the Ministry of Local Government, Rural Development and Cooperatives, and local government institutions. The analytical support informed the reform of the block grant system to prioritize fiscal transfers to local governments that promote green development actions. In the fourth activity, the World Bank providing analytical support to establish a national clean air program working with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and the Department of Environment. Specifically, analyses are being carried out to identify a set of key cost-effective air quality management inventories and to recommend the design of the legal and institutional framework for establishing an economy-wide MRV system for non-greenhouse gas air pollutants. The National Clean Air Program will have long-lasting positive impacts on women and children who are vulnerable to air pollution impacts. To conclude, GPS is supporting Bangladesh on multiple fronts to address critical environmental challenges so that Bangladesh can transition to a more green and resilient development pathway. The government of Bangladesh appreciates the support and we look forward to the continued partnership. That's all from my part and thanks everybody for patient sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alam. Obviously, just to remind colleagues that the posters are also outside on display, so at the appropriate time during the breaks and lunch hour, you can actually also do a gallery walk and see, and they can follow up. There's a lot of details that I've captured, but I'm sure colleagues can follow up on that. Okay, now we move to Maldives. Raya Hussein from the Ministry of Climate Change, Environment and Energy. Raya.
Hello, everyone. I'm Raya. I'm from the Ministry of Climate Change, Environment, and Energy, Maldives. So, for those who are not familiar with Maldives, Maldives is a chain of 26 atolls, and each of these atolls are bordered by tiny, tiny islands. And there are a total of roughly 1,200 islands. So we're not just one island, there are many islands. So as you can imagine, we are highly dependent on our blue natural capital, as most of our country, in fact, 99% of our country is just ocean, which is why our poster is focused on blue economy. More than half of our GDP and jobs are related to the tourism and fisheries sectors, which are directly dependent on healthy marine ecosystems. And while that indicates that blue natural capital is very much the foundation of our economy, and while it has led to significant improvements in our physical and human capital, in the recent 2 decades, development has been putting a lot of pressure on these ecosystems through excessive coastal developments, marine pollution, and ocean heating, coupled also by the rapidly changing climate. In the past 2 years, through the Global Program on Sustainability's Targeted Technical Assistance Grant, the good work by the World Bank in close collaboration with key government partners such as our ministry, as well as the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Fisheries and Ocean Resources, and the Ministry of Tourism, has produced very timely analytics that helps us better understand the extent of the development pressures on our natural capital, as well as examine the benefits and opportunities for furthering a sustainable and resilient blue economy in Maldives by following the green, resilient, inclusive development framework. Just recently, in last February, the Maldives Country Environmental Analysis CEA was launched, which takes input from GPS-supported activities such as the Nature Financing Analysis Workshop in 2022, where out of the 76 participants, 55% of them were female. Secondly, the Natural Resource Data Systems and Trends Analysis, as well as development of Natural Capital Accounting Roadmap and a Blue Carbon Strategy. In addition to the CEA, these activities are also informing the Country Climate Development Report, currently in the initial stages of development. The CEA puts forth actionable recommendations addressing all the development pressures through the conservation of high biodiversity areas, restoration of coral reef and mangrove ecosystems, mainstreaming sustainable coastal protection, improvements to pollution management, and increasing sustainable natural resource use in tourism and fisheries. All of which, in a way that, importantly, promotes the leadership of women and youth to support the shift towards a sustainable blue economy. Particularly, the CEA highlighted 2 overarching action areas. First, improving monitoring mechanisms to better understand the extent and condition of our natural capital through bottom-up and top-down approaches towards improved national planning, especially to improve the management of protected areas. Second, bridging the nature finance gap of $12 billion, and there are efforts to close this gap currently in place that began parallelly with the CEA to establish a conservation trust fund in Maldives. To implement these CEA recommended actions on the ground, over $20 million in Global Environment Fund and Adaptation Fund grants have been secured. Now to conclude, I'd just like to say that Maldives is just beginning working towards a blue economy with ongoing efforts by the government of Maldives towards advancing data generation, monitoring, and strategic planning. And while much more is still there to be done, the significant achievements from the GPS-supported activities in the past 2 years have certainly propelled us closer to achieving this goal of a blue economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the applause, and thank you so much, Raya, for your inputs. So we move from Maldives to Tunisia. Abi Ben from the Sahara and Sahel Observatory.
Yes. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I am Abir Baramdan from the Sahara and Sahel Observatory. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you the essential point of our current work regarding the development of natural capital accounting for sustainable natural-based ecotourism development in Tunisia. The main objective of our work with the World Bank and Sahara and Sahel Observatory, the Ministries of Environment and Tourism, on this technical assistance is to guide the development of Tunisia tourism sector in a way more sustainable and resilient to threats such as climate change by developing and using a set of ecosystem natural capital accounts at different level to inform and provide government of Tunisia with decision tools. I want also to emphasize that the GPS program support has helped in the first phase to inform the CCDR in terms of integrate landscape management based on ecosystem services, modeling, and enabling an assessment of the cost analysis of action and inaction in context of expected climate change impact in 23 and 2030 and 2050, as you see in the posters, with a case study with the watershed of Seliana. Regarding the ENCA of sustainable tourism, it aims to inform decisions makers to strengthen the sustainability of tourism and diversify the tourism offer in different landscape, which will support the implementation of sustainable tourism strategy by 2035. The tourism sector is one of the most contributor of the economy of Tunisia, and at national level, we really appreciate this technical assistance. It came really in the appropriate moment to help Tunisia to develop its tourism strategy. And in terms of progress, at the national level, we have progress in natural capital analysis, data analysis. We have also progress in using data and evidence to inform policies. For example, we have collected a set of data to create the expected account of tourism in a comprehensive database and a related geo-enabling platform. We also already done some capacity building programs, and we will continue to September 2040 to strengthen the capacity of stakeholders involved in this progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I noticed, of course, on tourism, so there's quite some convergence also with Maldives, focuses on tourism and Tunisia, so that's quite some learning. Okay, so last but not least, Turkey. Yeah. Mr. Levent Alpa from it's called Taxstat, yeah? Taxstat, the statistical agency.
Yeah, Turkstat.
Yeah.
Turkish Statistical Institute.
Yeah. The floor is yours.
Good morning, distinguished and esteemed colleagues. I'm delighted to hearing from implementing countries the achievements and impressive works for national capital accounting. I'm glad to start with our appreciation. Today I stand before you to sharing our enthusiasm to being involved in national capital accounting projects financed by World Bank. And this project, marked by its significance and impact, play a pivotal role in Turkey's natural capital accounting for future. It is the sustainable because it will be the third NCA project for Turkey. The first one is in 2015, valuing water resources. And second one is 2016, involving forest and services in a small forest area. That was the piloting project. And it is the third project, and the scope of the geographical coverage is Bolaman and Çekerek Basin will be pilot project. So why natural capital accounting is popular in Turkey? Strategic Budget Office set out sustainable development plans for 5 years, and it covers 2022 to 2026, and remarks many bullets to environment protection and biodiversity. Let me read translation: the circular economy, sustainable production and consumption patterns, and protect terrestrial and marine ecosystems, ensuring sustainable use and enhancement of biodiversity, establishing ecological corridors, many much more targets that triggers the environmental policies. And most common policies: a national climate change strategy, national climate change actions, net zero emission target to 2053, circular economy, and green economy transition policies, the main policies. So our projects start in fall of the 2022. World Bank and UNSD team visits our country, and we had several meetings with stakeholders in Turkish government, Ministry of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Agriculture and Forest, General Directorate of Foreign Affairs and General Director of Forestry, Minister of Treasury and Finance, and Strategy and Budget Office. After this enacting policies, natural capital assets data demanding from our government sites. Another side is Turkey has a candidate country to entering European Union. So Turkey fulfills the prerequisite to entering European Union, and as an environmental statistical group, we follow European environmental strategy and regulation to fulfill and compile comparable statistics. The target is, again, 2016, 2026. We will compile and publish ecosystem accounts. So we are in the middle of the project. It's the reason this presentation is much more progress report in the project. We have started the extend account and complete the extend account. We use global IOCN, global ecosystem typology to national level, and of course we use mask the pilot area, and we finish it. And the first task force group is the wood provision. It's the first ecosystem services. For the wood provision, we calculate the net increments in the Boğaman Çekerek basin. And also the second one will be non-wood forest products in the forest, DG Forest Ecosystems Services. Will lead this topic, and after that we'll continue with global climate regulation, soil retention, flood control, crop provision, and last one, the natural base recreation. And we will finish this project until this year. So the key output is the pilot ecosystem extent account at the national level will finish, that we complete part, and piloting ecosystem services in the selected watershed, and roadmap the production of ecosystem service accounts to the national level. It's an important part, I think. And training use of geographical information system Inca tool. It's the important part of the key outputs. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. And I realize there's a lot of information, but no time. But as I said, you know, all the posters are out there, so you're all welcome. Can we give a final round of applause to our panelists and presenters? And now you're at liberty to take back your seats in the plenary. And then we'll now move to the next session, session 6, to look at country experiences on biodiversity policies. I would like to invite our moderator for that session, Mr. Gunnar Shalin. I hope I pronounced it very well. And as you come, just to let you know that there's some slight changes in the panel team. So from Ghana, we will have Miss Evelyn Wright Hansen, I hope, from the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation. So we will not have Mr. Peter Derry. Is Miss Evelyn here? Please, thank you. Welcome to the panel stage. And then from Kenya, we have Mr. Musa Kathanje. Mr. Musa is actually the Director of Macro and Fiscal Affairs in the National Treasury. So we apologize because we didn't get your title right, so we have updated that. And then we have, of course, Ms. Elaine Van Wyk. I hope I got it right, from the Finance Solution Incubation and Implementation Lead at the Sustainable Finance Coalition. So Gunnar, you have your 1 hour. I will leave the floor to you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Philip. It's so wonderful to be here. I haven't attended your previous meetings, but I'm meeting so many old and new friends here, and it's a delight to be here. Now I just need to get my things up and running here, and I will introduce the speakers again. So, welcome to our session on country experiences on biodiversity policies. And that is, of course, the last on theme 3, getting the incentives right for biodiversity conservation. It's right at the core of the theme of this forum, this conference. So as you will see here in a minute, the session will provide a platform to share their experiences in implementing policy instruments for nature conservation and development. It will offer opportunities to exchange insights and lessons learned in implementing specific policy instruments in selected countries. And first remark here, we have manels and womels and all kinds of panels. So the first thing here is, of course, that thanks to the organizer, we have the perfectly balanced panel. So thank you, organizers, for that. Secondly, I hope that you will appreciate the change in setup. There will be no presentations, no slides, no PowerPoints, but there will be a discussion. So we have 3 rounds of questions to the panelists, and I've asked them to be somewhat brief so that there will be a lot of time for your questions to really pursue these issues of, how do you do it in practice and what are the experiences? So as you listen to these questions and discussions, please sharpen your pencils and think about how this applies to you and prepare some questions. And with the able help of the panelists, I'm sure that we will make some time at the end to make this happen. Of course, we started a little bit late, so we will go in 5 minutes into the lunch, but I hope that you don't mind that. All right. Now, we heard brief presentations of the panelists. Actually, I have much more deep presentation. And I think it's worthwhile to listen where they are coming from because there is such a wealth of experience on this panel. So first, Emily, you're a development planner with a practical experience in public sector budgeting, stakeholder engagement, policy development, and mainstreaming biodiversity into the National Development Planning System of Ghana. You joined the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation in Ghana in 2010, working with Policy Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation Directorate, and now with the Environment Directorate, one of the technical directorates. You're the principal development planning officer, like a deputy director, working as a head of the biodiversity unit, very relevant for this session. You led the process for the development of the 2016 National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, so we can talk about that. and the 2018 Sixth National Report. You hold a MSc in Development Planning and Management from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and a first degree from the same. Passionate about women empowerment and building the capacity of the next generation through mentoring and coaching. Can we welcome Evelyn? Thank you. Thank you. Now, Eleni van Wyk, Finance Solutions, Incubation and Implementation Lead, Sustainable Finance Coalition. You lead the incubation and implementation of finance solutions for the Sustainable Finance Coalition. You're a niche tech specialist who works on developing and implementing innovative finance solutions for conservation. You drive on-the-ground implementation of fiscal benefits for Wilderness Foundation Africa, is the communications and logistics coordinator for the IUCN WCPA Sustainable Finance Specialist Group, very elaborate. You provide training and fiscal benefits in the conservation sector, has a background in commerce and education, is a qualified chartered accountant. That's very impressive for me. You have done extensive research on policy making and financial incentives while lecturing taxation as a module at Stellenbosch University for 20 years. An expert in the field of biodiversity, tax incentives, and other innovative finance solutions. Welcome. As Philip said, last but not least, Musa Katanje, Director of Macro and Fiscal Affairs Department, National Treasury of Kenya. Director of the Macro and Fiscal Affairs Department. Over 28 years of experience in macroeconomic policy formulation and implementation from both National Treasury and economic planning. Joined the National Treasury in 2013. Worked 17 years at the Central Bank of Kenya. You represent the Principal Secretary and National Treasury in the meetings of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank in Kenya. Extensive professional training in macroeconomic policy, monetary policy management, fiscal policy formulation, and you're the focal point for the Human Capital Project at the World Bank. So, welcome. So what a panel. So what I'll do now is to just have 3 rounds here. We'll go down. Please also refer to your colleagues if you feel like it, to make this a little bit more lively. And then, of course, if we make time, there will be a lot of time for questions also from the audience. Starting, and there is a reason why you sit like you sit. We'll take you turn by turn. So Emmeline, first you. So could you tell us then more about Ghana's biodiversity policy and what drives these recent updates of the policy? Because that's what you're working on. Let's see if your mic works.
I think it works. But before I answer your question, today is Ghana's Independence Day. And I, on behalf of my colleagues, would want to present these chocolates to Lesia. I don't know how she's going to distribute it, maybe on country basis so that everybody gets a bite. It's from cocoa grown in Ghana and chocolates produced in Ghana. So this is for you all. Greetings from Ghana.
You too, huh? Wonderful. Thank you for everything. Who makes the conference happen. So thank you so much. Very good intervention.
Okay, so sometime in 2018, Ghana initiated the process to develop a national biodiversity policy. But just at the time when we were about submitting it to cabinet, then we remembered that what was the underlying motivation for developing that policy was our NBSAP that we thought should have an overarching policy to drive it. And so we realized that our NBSAP was actually based on the Aichi biodiversity targets that this morning we all heard has died because we have a new framework. So then we decided to wait until the post-2020 framework, as we called it at that time, was fully developed and adopted for us to be able to align our policy to the framework. So we waited, then COVID hit. And for those of you who follow the Convention on Biological Diversity process, you would know that it took us some 4 years to develop the framework instead of the originally planned 2 years. So we waited until December 2022 when state parties to the convention adopted the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in Montreal. So now we are back to say factory settings. We need to now align the draft policy that we had to the new framework so that it makes it easy for the policy to inform the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan that we are developing. And then it makes it easier for us to implement actions that would help us to achieve the targets and also to make it possible and easier for us to be able to report on the various targets that are set in the new framework. So that is one of the things that is driving the policy review that we are currently doing. Because we are a state party, we can't sit aloof, we need to report, we need to be connected to what is happening. The other thing that is driving this policy review is the environmental issues that we have confronting us as a nation. For those of you who have followed happenings in Ghana, we are having issues with illegal mining, which we call galamsey. And unfortunately for us, some of this mining is happening in our forest areas. So we need to rethink how we do things. There's a new bill that was recently passed that allows mining in forest reserves. Unfortunately for us, it's happened already, it's been approved. So what do? Civil society organizations are asking that as the ministry in charge of biodiversity and host of the focal point, it is necessary that we go back either to repeal the law or to review it, even though it's short-lived. But we need to take actions now. What do? So we need to connect policy to the actions that we are taking on ground. So these are some of the things informing what we do. When we look at the effects of climate change as well, it means that we need to think how we have set things out. So we have projects, for instance, that would earlier on, especially for coastal management, would just have focused on the gray areas. Now we are rethinking how to do things, and so we are having interventions that would have the green infrastructure also coming in, so that we're not just doing gray and doing business as usual. So it's the happenings around us and the demand from civil society, from the populace, that are also pushing us to go back and review the policy that we started working on. Thank you.
Seeing what an evolution over time and really challenging the really hard issues too. Thank you for sharing, and I'm sure that this is relevant for most countries. Thank you for sharing. Eleni, can you share your experience on designing and implementing economic instruments for biodiversity? Because that's what you're doing.
Let me just switch this on. Thanks, Gunnar. Yes, so my experience in implementing and designing tax benefits for conservation, especially, a very interesting journey. So we have two conservation tax incentives in the South African Tax Act that we've been designing and implementing. But interestingly enough, when they were first introduced into the Tax Act, they were not fit for purpose and not really beneficial to the taxpayers who commit their land and their actions to conservation. So, from experience, it is very clear that one needs to engage with the policymakers, have national policy engagement, have the legislative framework correctly written so that incentives for conservation are actually beneficial and not just, black on white and it can't be implemented, or if implemented, it's not really beneficial. So we had a lot of intense national policy engagement and also had an amendment of the legislation that was initially in the Tax Act to make it fit for purpose, easily implemented, and also beneficial. What's more important is that they also need to be impactful. So some of the tax benefits are not that impactful, but the one is particularly impactful, and I'll talk about it a bit later. And then you also need a driver for a biodiversity tax incentive or for any fiscal incentive for conservation. And the driver in South Africa for this are the community of practice, and then also your specialized skill sets, the tax practitioners who implement these tax benefits on behalf of landowners and taxpayers. So you need a driver that is absolutely crucial. Also, no point in having a tax incentive or any fiscal incentive and no one runs with it. And then very importantly, grassroots engagement with the landowners and the taxpayers to basically gain their confidence and their trust, because tax affairs are quite confidential and sensitive. When people hear, "Oh, I need to discuss my tax with this person," they back away immediately. But when you gain their confidence and you maintain absolute confidentiality in terms of their tax affairs, it is very easy to engage with them and to explain to them the sometimes significant benefits that they can get from these tax deductions. Yeah, so that's my experience. You have the building blocks that I've mentioned, and I'll mention them again, but that's important for getting beneficial tax incentives implemented.
Early in South Africa or in many other countries too?
So we've done in South Africa for now. We've been scoping other countries for the same building blocks and to scope the potential or assess the potential for replication there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Soon to come to your country. Thank you so much. Now, for Musa, we've heard a little bit about Kenya here before in the conference. So coming now from the fiscal side, how much does nature-based tourism contribute to the Kenyan economy? And what economic policies in Kenya is Kenya implementing to protect nature, promote nature-based tourism? Because that's a big thing in Kenya, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Let me begin first by thanking the World Bank for bringing us here. Apparently, in this panel, I'm the only one from the Ministry of Finance, so maybe I'm the money bag here, or the money person, except the World Bank. And yeah, but we'll see what we shall do by the end of the discussion. But let me say that tourism is a very critical sector, particularly in our Kenyan economy. The structure of our economy is that it is well diversified. The share of GDP of tourism could be small, 1.1, but it has a very high impact because of two things. It gives us foreign exchange and significant foreign exchange. In the national accounts that we normally report, it's classified under accommodation and food services. And I think when we look at also issues of employment, I think there has been a lot of around 78,000 direct jobs when I look at statistics for 2022. And this is because the sector is still rebounding from the COVID. I think that's the 1 year that we had a real challenge, similar to other economies. So we saw employment growth by 2022 of 26%. And when we review that data in terms of arrivals, that 6% of arrivals are actually for holidays. And for holidays, usually are the people who spend time in our game reserves, in our nature. And 27% come to visit families. And then there is the MICE, the business meetings, which is also about 27%. What we have as a country is that a lot of natural habitats and wildlife constitute the key attraction for tourism, kind of just the nature-based tourism. And to enhance that, I think we have the national policy of planting 15 billion trees by 2030 to improve our forest cover from around 8 to around 11%, and that will satisfy the constitutional requirement of 10% tree cover. These are the best assets that underpin nature-based tourism. And we also have a national biodiversity strategy and action plan for the year 2019 to 2030. There are 6 goals of that strategy, but I would just mention 2. One is to mainstream biodiversity conservation and sustainable use into decision making across all sectors, so that we are able to deal with the causes of biodiversity losses. And then there is the issue of reducing the direct pressures on biodiversity and maintain their capacity to provide goods and support livelihood for the country. Under the national plan, because we have the national development plans, in our case, we have the MTP4, there is also mention of nature-based tourism to ensure land use reforms, to ensure sustainable use of land, and so that we don't degrade our land for purposes of our wildlife. Ensure security of tenure, transparency, and access to title, and then position Kenya as among the top 10 long-haul and leading regional tourist destination. But more importantly, conservation efforts, like I mentioned, of increasing forest cover. Of course, there are various policies Kenya and any other countries are doing to recoup or to recover from the COVID pandemic so that tourism gets back to where it was pre-COVID. And I think there are quite a number of things. Top on that is Kenya removed visas for visitors in the country in December, so it's kind of, you are all welcome to come. And like our president has positioned this as the crown of mankind. You are coming back home, so you don't need a visa. You just get into a plane and get back home. I think that's the marketing tool or the real value that we are looking at. There are a lot of conservation issues on nature, supporting development of the National Wildlife Agenda that's ongoing, and also mapping up tourist niche products so that by 2027, we should be able to achieve a tourist arrival of 5 million. Currently, we are around 1.4 or 1.5. The highest we have ever gone is 2 million, but with the removal of the visas for all visitors, both for nature-based tourism and for holidays and conferences, we target to reach 5 million by 2027. There are a lot of other things, I think, which are ongoing, diversifying the various products that we have. We know the African market is huge, and I think this is one of our attraction areas to encourage Africans to come to Kenya and come back home. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So what I feel, echoing Valerie from yesterday also, what is so reassuring here is not only that all these things happen, but that the Treasury is very, very well aware of it. And I think that is what this forum is all about. So thank you so much for sharing. Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper and a little bit briefer. Second round, Emmeline. So you were telling us about this elaborate process of developing the action plan and so on, right? So can you name some successes in biodiversity action in Ghana, thanks to these plans and the conducive policy instruments that you are implementing as part of it? Encourage us.
So thanks to support from the World Bank, Ghana implemented a 10-year project called the Sustainable Land and Water Management Project. And under that project, we had payment for ecosystem services where we were not giving monetary benefits, but we were giving those involved some equipment to work with, especially for those who are farmers. And for those who were working in the degraded forest areas, we were giving them seedlings to be able to help us restore what we had lost. Another project that has come of age and has been in I think since 2021, has been the Green Ghana Day project, where we are providing seedlings to citizens, irrespective of where you are located, for you to plant at least one tree, either in your home, around your house, your school, your workplace, in the urban areas. The whole idea is just to green the environment. And then we also have what we call the community resource management areas, which we are adding on to our protected areas. So these areas are managed actually by communities. We're empowering the communities to be able to put up some plantations that they would benefit from. Similarly, we have the modified Tunja system, where if you're a farmer, you are given tree seedlings to be able to plant in your farming space so that you are conserving biodiversity, you are protecting the species, especially because we are losing some tree species from our space. So we are introducing some of these old species that we used to have for them to be able to restore what we have lost. We also have the Youth in Forest Plantation Enterprise Project that is ongoing, and this is targeted mainly at the youth for them to be able to create a business out of forest plantations that they are growing. For some of them, the agreements are if we were to give them out for logging, what percentage comes to the youth? And if it's for the community that is planting those plantations and for them to be able to manage them, what are the benefit sharing arrangements that are coming from that? We also had the opportunity to implement the adaptation fund projects in the northern part of the country. That one too, we wanted to protect the water bodies, so we were planting trees along the watersheds so that with the effects of climate change, we are not caught off guard. So we've had a number of projects and interventions that have been ongoing. And most of the things we do in the biodiversity space, apart from what government does, a lot of it is driven by civil society and the communities. They are on the ground, they feel the effects of it the most. So if we don't empower them, if we don't involve them, we would be at a loss. And the new framework on biodiversity is calling on us to ensure that it's the whole of government and whole of society. So we're bringing everybody to the table. Whatever we want to do, whatever we want to achieve at the end of the tenure of this new framework, we are doing such that everybody has a say and everybody has a stake.
Thank you. Yeah, so you have a lot of projects, so, and of course we don't have time here to hear about how you implement them, but it will of course be very interesting in the longer term to share, how you create incentives for this to be spreading throughout the country. So, but we move on. Eleni, you were talking about this it sounded like quite labor-intensive interactions and so on. So what do you feel? What is the potential of these instruments to scale up in South Africa, but also in the region? Is this just like a blip that you're driving, or can it be cascaded?
So the one tax incentive has already been scaled and reached significant impact. I think our return on investment for that tax incentive itself is around 5,000%. So it's quite significant. So that one's been scaled already in South Africa. It is quite labor intensive, but one just needs to get all those tax specialists on board to also participate in implementing this tax incentive. Then the other tax incentive is gone to scale now. We're going into a scale project or impact project across South Africa, and that one relates especially to threatened species and ecosystems. So we are embarking on a scale project for that one. So there is definitely potential for scale, but a little bit of a lack of tax skills in terms of people who know conservation tax incentives. In terms of replicating this to other countries, as I mentioned earlier, there are building blocks that one can determine upfront to see whether this is replicable or not. And the building blocks for tax incentives are generic. So you need obviously your legislative framework, you need your national policy engagement. So it's crucial that government is on board and provides that regulatory framework and sort of regulatory infrastructure that we talked about earlier or yesterday on the way from the airport. That enabling environment needs to be there. Then your specialist skill sets like tax skills, grassroots engagement with taxpayers and landowners. Yeah, so it's quite easy to scope in other countries whether they have that in place. And if that's in place, it's completely replicable. Or if that can be put in place in a short time, one can replicate it to those countries.
Wonderful. Thank you. Very encouraging. Now we will move on and refer to the last presentation in the previous section when we heard that the World Bank is attempting to bring nature more into the macroeconomic modeling. And of course, you are also very much depending on macroeconomic modeling in your work. So how are you working, or how would you like to work on integrating nature, climate into your macroeconomic models in Kenya?
Thank you very much for that question. And indeed, coming after Tijen, who presented on the World Bank macro models, I think this is a relevant question or issue for us. I will first give you where I derive this energy from. I think we did a climate assessment by the World Bank last year, or thereby from the previous year. And I think they came to my office, and one of the issues was how can I tell them where the economy will be by 2050? So in normal situation, using our framework, I said, okay, this is where we will be. But I think they had another issues, because I gathered it is from climate. So they were talking of precipitation, they were talking of degradation. So I asked myself, but we cannot do this, because we were not in that space, and given where we are as countries. And so I developed a bit of interest during that process of CCDR to look at the macro structural model and see whether their MF mode could, because we realized it could reflect some changes in climate change, nature, and I got interested, and I was saying, oh, then why don't you help us to have this thing, so that, because you will not stop doing assessment for Kenya. The next assessment could be due maybe in 3-4 years. I don't know at what point they will come. So that we build the capacity internally, particularly from the Ministry of Finance perspective and the relevant institutions, so that we participate more aggressively. And so what we did during that process, and we were heavily engaged, supported, and we enhanced our awareness on the impact of climate change that could transmit to the economy. I think there were the business as usual and the aspirational outcomes, and I think they are captured in our poster outside, just to see what are the general impacts on the economy when there are changes in precipitation, temperature changes, agricultural productivity, labor productivity, among others. I mean, issues of forestry. So they became very easy. But where we sit in our normal and many countries, we deal with financial statistics. When you tell me about forestry, I get lost a bit. And I think that's where sometimes when we reason, because our models, our frameworks may not be calibrated to pick those things at the moment. But I think we have an opportunity to green the macro frameworks that we are doing, so that we can be able to capture climate-related issues more correctly. Particular issues of land-based activities like productive forest activities. We should be able to differentiate between aggregate commodities and crops for food security. We should also be able to, in our analysis, to differentiate rain-fed and irrigated crops. And so in that case, we are able to better capture ecosystem services by understanding how various land cover impacts on biodiversity and habitat. Issues of tourism that I've just spoken about, issues of carbon sequestration and potential and reduction in soil erosion and impact of floods. What is our game here? Our interest and our concern, our ask is, can we be able to build national capacity? Can we be able to build, Ministry of Finance, for example, if the Ministry of Forestry or Climate comes and says, we require this support, if it's not within the national macroeconomic framework, we are lost sometimes how to support. Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the agency that is actually correcting and reporting on our statistics, need to be empowered so that they can be able to actually correct the correct data on ecosystem statistics. And I think there is absolute need to strengthen that unit, because what you use is as good as what is measured, because if the authority says it is our Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, if they correctly measure, then I'm able to use it in doing analysis. But nevertheless, we need to have own government approach with all stakeholders, people in other sectors, climate, forestry, water, energy, so that we are able to integrate natural assets into economic budgeting so that we are able then to be able to support this big agenda. I can share this from where we sit after the climate assessment by World Bank. We quickly switched gears across the street to IMF. And we actually went for the RSF, Resilience Sustainability Trust. And we got funding to the tune of, let me just check my numbers here, 544 million on climate-related reforms that we are actually undertaking as a result of the CCDR that was done by the World Bank. So, and it then spoke to our desire that if we build adequate capacity across our economies, then there will be a lot of synergies, there will be a lot of things to do. And just to give you an example, in that program, RSF, one of the structural benchmarks that we were meant to achieve by April this year is to do an assessment, as what we call them fiscal risk assessment, long term. And I can tell you, after CCDL, we invited IMF with HEA, and we used the QCraft model to do the long-term fiscal sustainability risks. And currently that assessment is published in our budget policy statement on our website. It is now means we have met the structural benchmark due in April this year. And that means then we will get the requisite disbursement under that program. So there's a lot of interest and a lot of connection, because I did also hear the first presentation where they were saying in financing now we need to move to nature-based debt for nature swaps. And I could mention that in the next budget we are thinking of how to have debt for nature swaps, and we are in discussions with the local IMF teams in Nairobi. So,
just ask a small follow-up question there, because you're talking about kind of a one government approach, but are you also involving academia in this? Because they are the ones who train, your next round of colleagues, etc., and they can sustain this capacity within the country. Are you actively working with the universities in Kenya too?
No, but I think what we are working with is there's a group, a technical group, and KNBS statistics for correcting of statistics, and what we have been, I think, because and rightfully, let me tell you, if you don't bring the Ministry of Finance in this discussion, the environment will do a lot. But then there's very little connection to budgeting. They not only be budgeted by World Bank, but they require domestic resources from government, so that we catalyze that with the donor support. And I think that, to me, that's the best way to ensure sustainability. So.
Thank you. We were doing so well on time, but now we're a little bit stretching it. We still want to have more time for questions also from the audience. We have about 20 minutes left, but let's have a quick third round here, and then open it to the audience. Thank you, Musa. All right, third round. Emmeline, we heard about your elaborate process for the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans. And of course, this conference is also about the data, and we're starting to talk about the data here. What role does geospatial analysis and measurement evaluation of ecosystem services play in shaping these policies and to implement your action plan?
So the geospatial analysis and the results that come out, especially out of the NCA work being done in Ghana, for instance, it helps us to identify, for instance, which areas we are losing, the changes in land use, and for us to be able to craft interventions and to couch policy that will help us to either restore or to conserve. So if we don't have the data, we'll be formulating policies based on guesswork. Similarly, if you have an intervention and you cite it in the wrong place, thinking that it should survive, even though you do not know what conditions exist there, it will not work. So the geospatial analysis helps us in our interventions to know what exists now. So if you take target 2 on the GBF, which talks about conservation, what have we conserved? What percentage? It is the geospatial analysis that would give us that information. Target 3 is also heavily dependent on geospatial analysis. We are targeting 30 by 30 to be able to do that in 2030. Who would give us that data if not for geospatial analysis? So we need the analysis to be done, for the data to be collected, for policymakers to be able to make sense of it, to be able to intervene, to be able to formulate the necessary policy, and ultimately for us to be able to report and contribute to the global targets that we have set for ourselves. Also, in valuing ecosystem services, if we don't know the value of the ecosystem, we don't even place much premium on it. So we're going to place more premium if we know the value of the ecosystem. So our ecosystem accounts is telling us what we need to do and then how we will go about it. So that when we present it to the policy makers and the decision makers, they know what they have to do to be able to get the best out of our ecosystems. Similarly, if we want to evaluate any development intervention, so if we had a forest that we would want to save as a national park, we will not be able to tell what we will make out of that national park if it has some mineral reserves in there and we decide, for instance, to mine. Our analysis is what will tell us if we mine in the short term, this is how much we would make. But if we saved this forest as an ecotourism park, this is how much we will make, so that there's enough data for us to be able to compare and then be able to take informed and evidence-based decisions. Similarly, if we want to identify some hotspots, if we don't have the geospatial analysis, we won't be able to identify which ones are real hotspots or whether they are just areas that have some biodiversity. But for us to be able to determine which ones are high biodiversity hotspots, we need these analysis, we need the data to be able to inform our designation of some biodiversity hotspots.
Moving on, Eleni, now you've talked about how you roll out your program, etc. So let's look at the impacts. So do you have any idea of how the benefits to taxpayers, how they have been for those who have accessed the tax deduction, and what are the benefits of the government and the contribution for the global biodiversity framework goals and targets? So do we have some impact already?
Thanks, Gunnar. So the impact on taxpayers, obviously direct impact because they save on taxes, which influences their cash flow. And we've done we received some testimonials from taxpayers, especially after COVID, where they testified that the tax deduction enabled them to have more cash in pocket, to be able to retain their labor force through COVID, where money was quite scarce, and then also increase their anti-poaching operations or even employ more people from the surrounding areas. So those were real direct benefits to the taxpayer, the landowner, and to the neighboring communities and the labor force. But to government, and I want to go back to what Dr. Bekele talked about yesterday when he talked about banking on protected areas, and this goes hand in hand with that. The cost to the government to implement or establish and manage private protected areas in South Africa is more than 400% less than when government had to do it themselves. So the return on investment for government is significant. And they also don't have to implement post-declaration support because the landowner is normally managing the land itself. And then obviously in the provisioning of services, indirect and direct benefits from the protected areas. And one of these tax incentives is directly related to the declaration of a protected area on private or communal land. And then lastly, in terms of the deductions or the fiscal benefits contributing to GBF, it contributes to GBF's goals and at least 7 of the targets in terms of conserving threatened species, conserving biodiversity, etc. So, yeah, it's a significant contribution by the 2 tax incentives.
Actually, can I borrow that mic for a bit? So Musa, I'm very, very sorry, but we went almost for 10 minutes on your second question. So if you don't mind, or even if you mind, I think I'll skip your third because I've committed so hard for the audience, for them. So I want to be very elaborate now on how to ask these questions. We have 3 panelists, we have 15 minutes. What I would like to propose is that we take 3 questions, 1 for each of the panelists, and then we have a round, and then we'll see if we'll have a time for yet another round after that. And I will be the one to choose who will ask the question. So we start with who would like to ask a question for Emily? Row. Let's see. You haven't asked. You asked a lot of questions last time. Are you part of the organizer, aren't you? Do you have any country representatives here? Now you've also asked questions. Okay, you go here, Emily. No. He has all.
Okay, thank you very much to the panelists for this excellent session. So my question is to Emily. You told us that the government recently passed a law that encourages illegal mining in forest reserves. So I'm curious to know if this is related to this siloed approach where your ministry didn't know about this law before it was passed and now you're talking about it being repealed, or if, yeah, that's basically.
Think about that, because we will have 1 question each, and of course, Uju, everybody knows, but the next one who will ask for Eleni will need to introduce him or herself. So we have here at the very back. Okay, you have 1 mic there. Please introduce yourself.
Hello. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Matthias Piacho, Senior Economist at the World Bank. Thanks for all this great, inspiring discussion. My question for Eleni is, you talk about this tax exception on protected land that is being implemented, and I'm curious about what are the methods for verification that the government is implementing that area is actually being protected.
And finally, who would like to ask the first question to Musa? No one. Here we have. Yes. We need the integration here. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, indeed. My question is to Musa. And I was very intrigued by your efforts to attract more tourists to Kenya, and I hope to be one of those very soon. I was wondering if you incorporate any risk scenarios in your tourism planning or the modeling efforts on tourism revenues, if you incorporate any biodiversity risks or ecosystem collapse risks, for example. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Emmeline, you start and then you follow.
Okay, so the bill was passed, I'm tempted to say with so much speed, we were even surprised. It's not because we didn't collaborate. The bill actually emanated from our ministry. It came from the Environmental Protection Agency, that is an agency under our ministry, through the minister to cabinet for approval and then to parliament for it to be passed. But after it was passed, the uproar we got from stakeholders was enough to tell us that we need to go back to the drawing board. So there have been discussions ongoing, and like I mentioned earlier on, the data that supports the interventions or the policy decisions that we take. So at that time, we didn't have enough data to say that we should leave the reserves alone. Even though as biodiversity-minded people, you would want to conserve the forest. But beyond that, with all the economic conditions going around now, we are currently under an IMF program. So if we can generate some income from the resources that we have, Why not? So that was the case for mining in the forest reserve, more of the economic. But now that our attention is being drawn heavily, and civil society is inundated with their appeals for a repeal, the need for us to go back. So the engagements are ongoing. I'm sure that in a year or so, we'll be going back to Parliament. This year is an election year as well. So there's a bit of limited time for other things that might not be priority for government now, but it's something we're already working on to be able to work on that particular law that has been passed.
Yes, thank you. Do you want Matthias to repeat the question?
I couldn't hear properly what he was asking. I only heard verification. Was that correct?
Thank you for being honest. Yes.
Sorry.
Hello, can you hear me better now? I have like echo.
You need to speak slowly.
Speak
Okay.
very slowly,
You were
Matthias.
describing a tax exception for protected land areas that is implemented in South Africa, and I'm curious about what are the methods that the government has for verification that the land is actually being protected.
Thank you.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks, Matthias. Yeah, so the one tax deduction is for nature reserves on private or communal land, and those need to be declared in terms of our Protected Areas Act first. The title deeds to that land need to be endorsed to reflect that nature reserve status. So they are formally protected for at least 99 years or in perpetuity. And then the management of that land is also audited annually. So they don't have any loopholes to mismanage or to access the tax deduction when they're not eligible for it. Right, so the verifications, checks are there. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Thank you very much for the question on risk in tourism, and thank you for offering to come back home. You know, as one of the tourists, we really been glad to host you. Let me attempt this question by saying yes, indeed. Particularly when you are doing analysis, modeling, you'd have to take into account risks, and some of the risks, like for example, what we see is part of our tourism or nature-based is maybe range national parks. And what you also realize along the way is temperatures sometimes are rising a little bit faster. At the moment, as we sit here in Kigali, in Nairobi, temperatures are very, very high. And these also affect our wildlife corridor. And so when you are trying to foresee what will happen, you need to factor in some of these things in your analysis. Of course, the issues of degradation of maybe biodiversity, be it soil and forestry, you do, but remember we are also under a very ambitious tree planting exercise, so that we are able to restore what has been damaged or destroyed over time. Issues of, if you go to our Masai Mara, where the animals move from Tanzania to Kenya and Kenya to Tanzania, you know, and so there are all those kind of risks that one ought to bear in mind when you are doing analysis or doing modeling in some of these things. But it can be done better with, I think, your support. Given the challenges that we are going through, that we would wish to have on these new areas that are emerging globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Musa. We have exactly 6 minutes left of this session. Can we make it really, really brief and have a quick last round here? So you were waiting for Emmeline, right?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Okay. So my name is Emmanuel Steven Kamara, and this question is directly to Sis Emily. Yeah, I want to take this time to say happy 67 independence to you and to all Ghanaians around the world. Yeah. So you spoke of money in the forest, and I want to know what are those challenges that were faced in passing that bill or policy of managing the forest in the rural areas. And I also want to know what are some effects of it and, and those and what by any means affected the people of that rural areas. Thank you.
I think, why don't you start right away to answer that, and I'll find another question for one of the others, if we have. Please go ahead.
So in working on that bill, surprisingly, we didn't face opposition. When we engaged stakeholders and made an economic case for wanting to mine in the forest areas, we had support. And this is because of, as I mentioned, the issues we had earlier on in terms of our economic situation. But ultimately, the mining in the forest reserves is reserved, it's not for illegal mining, it's for legal mining companies. And these companies are made to post bonds so that after mining, they reclaim and restore. If they don't, because of the bonds they've posted, EPA and then the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources through the Forestry Commission now goes in to do the restoration. So it wasn't meant for illegal miners, for us to open the forest up, so to speak, for anybody at all who wanted to go into mining, to get into the mining space or in the forest. It was reserved for legal mining companies. So then it didn't have an issue with, let's say, the communities. The fringe communities, as I mentioned earlier on, have the Tuja system. And then the creamers they are working in, which brings them some benefits. And also because we have had some interventions that promote sustainable agric, most of the fringe communities did not have an issue. But for them, it meant that you are giving a mining company, a big mining company, so to say, access into the forest. But we are not allowed to mine or to log. We don't allow logging and mining in the forest until this law was passed, because we could not be too sure who would be getting in, because we didn't want the illegal miners and illegal loggers in the space. So we want to have a structured system. So the mining in the reserves is purely reserved for legally registered companies that we can track. These companies are expected to post the bonds. If they do not serve the condition, then government goes in to be able to reclaim and restore. And this is not done only by the government agencies. The communities around the forest are also engaged to be able to help with the restoration that is done after the mining happens.
And since lunch is approaching, we don't have any more questions. So I would like to thank you all for participating in this. And a last hand for our panelists. Fantastic. Thank you.
Gunnar as well. So let's give Gunnar a round of applause as well. So it's time to break for lunch. We'll be back here at exactly 1:35. So for colleagues that are following us virtually, so we have a 1 hour break for lunch, so you can also take your lunch break. If you don't have your voucher, please walk there at the back. You can see later there, pick your lunch voucher. Otherwise, enjoy your lunch and see you in the afternoon.